All right, let's dive into the biggest story of all time, our own. We're about to go on an incredible journey, millions of years into the past, to figure out how we, Homo sapiens, actually got here. It's a story that unfolds across continents, through ice ages, and over countless generations. But to really get a handle on it, you first have to completely rethink your idea of time.
So let's try a little thought experiment to wrap our heads around this. Imagine the Earth's entire 4.5 billion year history squeezed into one single calendar year, right? January 1st is the birth of the planet, and midnight on December 31st is right now. On that massive cosmic calendar, what's your guess? When did the very first, earliest human ancestors show up?
You're not going to believe this. On December 31st. Seriously, on this calendar, the dinosaurs get wiped out around December 26th. But our earliest ancestors, the first hominins that split off from the chimpanzee family tree, they don't even appear until around 8 p.m. on New Year's Eve. Our entire story starts in just the last few hours of the entire year.
Okay, so if our entire family tree only gets the last few hours of the year, what about us? You and me, Homo sapiens. When do we finally crash the party?
We show up at about 11:38 p.m., just 22 minutes before midnight. And get this, all of recorded history, we're talking the pyramids, the Roman Empire, the invention of the smartphone, all of that happens in the final minute. That just goes to show you that almost our entire story, 99.9% of it, takes place in a time before anyone wrote anything down, a time we call prehistory.
So what exactly is prehistory? Well, it's pretty simple. It's that enormous stretch of time before humans invented writing. It's the period where our story isn't found in books or scrolls, but it's written in fossils, in stone tools, and hidden in our very DNA.
Look at this timeline in real numbers. The journey kicks off with our earliest hominin relatives about 7 million years ago. But the first tools, they don't show up for another 4.5 million years. Our species, Homo sapiens, we only appear on the scene about 200,000 years ago. And writing, the thing that officially ends prehistory, that's just a measly 5,000 years ago. It's a tiny, tiny sliver at the very, very end.
So, what was the first giant leap? The thing that put our ancestors on this totally unique path? It wasn't a bigger brain. It wasn't some fancy new tool. Nope, it was much more basic than that. It was all about how we got around.
The absolute game changer was standing up and walking on 2 feet all the time. Our ape cousins, they kept using their hands to help them walk, but our ancestors stood tall. This one evolutionary move changed everything because, suddenly, our hands were free to carry food, to hold babies, and eventually to make tools. This was the spark that created this incredible feedback loop, pushing our brains to grow bigger and more complex.
So let's meet some of these early pioneers, shall we? The story kicks off in Africa. You've got characters like Sahelanthropus, one of the oldest hominins we've ever found. Then there's Ardipithecus, and of course, maybe the most famous of all, Australopithecus afarensis. That's the species of the legendary Lucy skeleton. For millions of years, Africa was the one and only cradle of human evolution.
And just to put things in perspective, the brain size of Sahelanthropus was only about 350 cubic centimeters. You know what else has a brain that size? A modern chimpanzee. So we were just getting started. Our brains had a long, long way to go. All right, so after millions of years of just walking around, a totally new chapter begins. And this one isn't just defined by our bodies, but by the dawn of invention. This is the era of our own genus, Homo. The very first of our kind to get the name Homo was Homo habilis, which literally means handyman. They showed up in Africa around 2.4 million years ago. Their brain was definitely bigger, and crucially, they're the first species that we can say for sure were making and using stone tools. What's so cool is that you can literally see our ancestors getting smarter, just by looking at the tools they left behind. It all starts with these really simple old wand choppers, basically a rock with a few sharp edges knocked off. Then, hundreds of thousands of years later, Homo erectus is making these beautiful, symmetrical, teardrop-shaped hand axes. And then, later still, you get the Neanderthals inventing the Levallois technique, where they carefully prep a stone core just to knock off one perfect, standardized flake. Each step shows a huge leap in planning and abstract thinking. And then came a technology that changed absolutely everything: fire. Once Homo erectus learned how to control fire, it was a revolution. It gave them warmth in the cold. It gave them protection from predators. And most importantly, it let them cook their food.
Cooking unlocked way more nutrients and energy, which was the fuel our brains needed to keep getting bigger and bigger.
So now our ancestors are armed with better tools, bigger brains, and the incredible power of fire. They were finally ready to do something no hominin had ever done before: leave home.
This was it, the first great human migration. Starting around 1.8 million years ago, groups of Homo erectus started to fan out from Africa into Asia and Europe. This is when we start finding famous fossils like Java Man and Peking Man, which just proves how incredibly far these early explorers traveled.
Now, one of the groups that evolved from these early migrations became our most famous relatives, the Neanderthals. They didn't just survive in the harsh, cold world of Ice Age Europe. They thrived. And you can forget that old stereotype of the brutish caveman. Neanderthals were incredibly smart. Their brains were just as big as ours, sometimes even bigger. They were expert hunters, made advanced tools, and they even buried their dead, which hints at some kind of complex, symbolic culture.
But while the Neanderthals were ruling Eurasia, something new was brewing back in the African homeland. A brand new kind of human was emerging, one that would eventually change the world forever. Us.
Okay, this is a really important point. We, Homo sapiens, appeared in Africa about 200,000 years ago. We did not evolve from Neanderthals. Let me repeat that. We did not evolve from them. We shared a common ancestor way, way back, but our two species evolved on completely separate paths, ours in Africa, theirs in Eurasia, for hundreds of thousands of years before we ever met.
So what was our secret weapon? What truly made us different? Well, it seems to be a full-blown ability for symbolic thought. Down in Blombus Cave in South Africa, archaeologists found things like shell beads and stones carved with geometric patterns that are over 75,000 years old. This wasn't about survival. This was about expression. It was art. It was identity. We were communicating with symbols. And this new way of thinking lit a creative fire. We suddenly had this cultural explosion. We developed the blade technique to make long razor-sharp tools. We invented bone needles so we could sew fitted clothing. We made fishhooks to tap into new food sources. And of course, we created these absolutely breathtaking cave paintings at places like Lascaux and Altamira. We weren't just surviving anymore, we were creating.
So, armed with this incredible new toolkit of technology and creativity, we set off on our own migration. This was the second out of Africa. And this time, things were different. We spread faster and farther than any human species before us, eventually populating every single corner of the globe.
And so, by about 12,000 years ago, that long, silent, prehistoric journey was finally coming to an end. We went from being a small group of primates who dared to stand up in an African forest to a global species, the last hominin standing. The age of prehistory was over. The stage was set for farming, for cities, for everything we know today. Every single human achievement since is built on this deep, incredible, prehistoric foundation, the epic story of us.